Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Genuine Chit-Chat. This week is a continuation of my chat with Thom King. Now, for anyone who tuned in last week, you'll know that Thom King is a CEO, he's an author, he's a serial entrepreneur, and he's also an awesome guy. And the reason I've released two parts of one chat as standalone episodes is because in each chat we talk about wildly different things. Now, for anyone who tuned into part one, you'll know that we spoke about the ketogenic diet, biohacking, meditation, mindfulness, a lot about sort of Thom's journey as an entrepreneur, and that sort of thing. However, this week what we're talking about is spirituality. Primarily that came from me asking Thom what he thinks happens after death. We speak about Memento Mori, which is being mindful of death, and Thom has some really interesting things to say about how he thinks the universe sort of works and what he thinks happens after death. And it's a shorter podcast than usual, but I think it's still very strong. That's more or less all I'm going to say about this. I can't really add much more without spoiling things. So, as usual, be sure to like us on the usual social media channels, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Reviews on iTunes are always appreciated. Any feedback from the show is appreciated, and all that jazz. Before the show gets started, there's a promo for the We're All Wicked podcast, so be sure to check that out if you like what you hear. That's about all for now, guys. So I'll be back at the end to give you more information on upcoming episodes and etc. So talk to you then.
Find the We're All Wicked podcast on iTunes or Spotify.
The rest of my day is ruined. You know that. You ruined my Saturday, you ass, jerk. You're a jerk. I'm gonna remind me on my next podcast to dedicate a song to you. You're an ass. You're an asshole.
I know.
Anybody who gives anything a hard time for being a quote-unquote ripoff is mentally retarded.
It kicks it off and it's like... No.
I'm going to go to a BDSM club. I got my ball gag ready. I need some more pain in my life. I need to release some of that pain.
Just your generic podcast.
Welcome to Genuine Chit-Chat, where we have honest conversations with interesting people. And I'm your host, Mike Burton. Well, I was going to ask, because we've spoken quite a lot about all of the, obviously, food and all that sort of jazz. I wanted to get your opinions on the sort of, a bit more of the spiritual side, if I can just steal you for a little bit longer.
Sure.
Oh, wonderful. So, just with, obviously, it was mainly because I saw an article on one of your sites about Memento Mori and, be mindful of death. And I very much like that idea because in today's society, a lot of people are afraid of death, and it's an understandable thing. The lights go out, you don't know what happens, but a lot of it is, it's one of those weird things that people say I'm morbid sometimes for saying these things. It's like, well, everyone you know and love is going to die. Like it's just part of life. You can't have life without death. And
Right.
the more I look at the world and the more my, let's call it spiritual, I'm still more of an atheist, but let's say spiritual ideology has kind of grown, is realizing everything's about balance. The
Right.
whole world, you can just look at it. The best thing is like trees. That's the easiest way to look at all plants. They live, and the cycle in a year is, they more or less live and die. But when they die, the leaves come off, and then they create sort of the ground layer and the foliage, I think it's called. And then the insects use that to live, and then the insects kind of do that thing, and then the birds eat the insects, and then helps pollinate. And all these things, it's just a big circle. It's just you can't build a mountain without making a hole, and vice versa.
Right.
So everything just balances itself out in the end. And so with that in mind, what's your opinion on sort of, it's a very vague and open question, but your opinion on death and things? Like, obviously eating well, we hope, will help curb off the inevitable, but what's your sort of views on these sorts of things?
Well, I use it as leverage. So I think that it's I always feel like I'm only one bad decision away from living on the streets, and, and that shocks a lot of people that know me. They're like, "Are you crazy?" No, you're successful, but I'm only as successful as the decisions I make, and so I do like to keep myself in check, if you will. by believing that I'm only one bad decision from being on the street, and then also that this could be my last second on this planet. Like, none of us know exactly when it's going to happen, but if you're mindful, and you're not afraid, that it will happen. Like, nobody escapes it. Steve Jobs didn't escape it. Paul Allen didn't escape it. So we all, I think it's what connects us all actually is our mortality. And I think that the closer you can touch your mortality, and the more you realize that you have very few moments left, the more grateful you are of the moments that you do have, and you don't waste them, you don't squander them with petty behavior and petty thoughts. You realize that you have, your life is a finite quantity, and you want to use every bit of it that you possibly can, and you don't want to waste any of it. So I do, as a reminder to myself, I have like a skull that sits on my counter
That's
that
awesome.
I just look at it, and it's like, yep, that's going to be me someday. So it's that constant reminder that makes life so rich, because it's just such a gift. And when you know that it's going to be taken away from you, and you don't know when, it really helps you maximize your human experience, if you will.
I agree completely. And it's one of those things where it is that fine line and that balance of, you have to be aware of death, you have to be mindful of death, but you can't worry about it all the time, because if you spend your entire life worrying about when you're next going to die, then you're not going to be able to experience sort of the maximum happiness or enjoyment you could have got out of the moments you had. So it's like, it's going to happen, but I'm going to try my best without going horrendously overboard and being obsessive about it. I'm going to eat healthily, I'm going to exercise regularly, I'm going to maximize that. And that obviously helps in many other aspects of life. You have a healthy diet and exercise regularly, it does help everything else, I find. And one thing that happened with me when you said about the sort of the closeness to death thing is about over 5 years ago now. So when I was 19, my dad passed away, and it was of cancer. So it was quite a slow process, if you will. And the year before that, my grandmother died, and then the year after that, my uncle died. So it's quite a big, 2 years. And I say this to people quite a lot. And when I mention these things, a lot of people, they kind of understand me. They do that thing where it's like, oh, I'm really sorry. Oh my God. And it's like, it's fine.
Right.
I wouldn't bring it up if I had an issue with talking about it. I'm completely fine with it and things. But it's one of those things where it's like, my dad dying was the worst thing that ever happened to me, but it's the best thing that ever happened to my perspective. It's that it changed me so much. It made me grow up much more as an individual, and really it kind of shook my system. Well, kind of shook my system obviously a lot, but it was that thing of, oh fuck, I thought, especially when you're a bit younger and things, you kind of had that mindset of, that will never happen to me. So you see car crashes happen or people get ill, and you go, that weird almost God complex of your own, where because you're in your own head and you can only see from your own perspective, you're like, that won't happen to me. This is me I'm talking about. I'm alive. I can, and it's that weird thing that when really horrible stuff happens, it's like, no, everyone is on an even playing field. We're all in this together. And it means that you have to have respect for each other. It makes a lot of people have respect for each other a lot more. And it does kind of give you that clarity in a way where, yeah, it's a horrible thing to happen, but it's one thing where I had many great years with my dad and I'll always love him and things like that. But it's like, at least it's not as much of a shock to the system now when that sort of things happen, And I'm just, did anything, I don't want to delve too far into your personal life, if just don't go too far if you don't want to, but like, did anything like that happen to you to kind of give you any sort of clarity, or has there been some sort of shift in your mental state over the years that's really kind of driven this perspective home?
Yeah, I went through an experience quite similar to yours. So I lost my mother 5 years ago to cancer, and I would say that witnessing her death was probably one of the most profound experiences of my life, because I'd never had been so close to somebody and actually watched them draw their last breath. And it's such a level of permanence, and it absolutely changes your perspective. And then just the last year, lost my father to cancer as well. And both of them were a very slow, long process. And it does with when my dad passed away, it was easier, not as much of a shock because I'd already seen it happen once, but it did change my philosophy, on how I live my life on a daily basis, because I just go back, if staring at the skull doesn't take me, doesn't give me gratitude for every moment that I have, reflecting on, watching both my parents draw their last breath does. So, I mean, those things, and you're right, when you do bring it up to people, they're like, oh no, so, yeah. And, and you have to tell them it's okay, because that's going to happen to you.
Yeah, that's the thing of it. Yeah.
It's probably happening right now. So, but it does shape you. It helps you grow. And then you realize the interconnectedness of every living thing. Like every living thing is born and every living thing ends up dying and making space for new life. So yeah, those are very formative experiences for sure.
Definitely. And I have interest. This is now a little bit more of just what do you think happens after death? Once again, if you don't want to delve into this, don't feel like you have to. But out of interest, what's your sort of? Do you think anything does happen or not, or any sort of thought?
That's a good question. I've never been asked this before on a podcast.
I apologize.
No apology necessary. These are the kind of conversations I like to have. Like,
I love it too.
Like really super deep, philosophical conversations. What do I think happens after we die? I don't believe anything happens, and I would consider myself an atheist. So I think as time goes on, I try to explore that a little more. Like, what do you think is going to happen? What's going to happen to me? Like, and then you really have to take a good look at who are you? I mean, you're a vehicle, a meat suit with trillions of bacteria that are basically guiding you emotionally. We think that all of the thinking goes on in our head, but it's just because that's where our eyes and ears and nose and mouth are located. But really, a lot of the emotions and a lot of what we process comes from our gut. So something compels me to believe that collection of trillions of bacteria that live in our body, that make up who we are, somehow dissipates and rejoins in other living creatures. So I think that maybe that essence of what we are, through that colony of bacteria, rejoins everything on Earth. And what happens to our conscious thoughts, I have no idea. I would imagine that it's just like turning off a TV. You'd get, there's no more signal, no more thoughts, no more memories, but the essence of who you are actually goes into the microbiome of all things.
Yeah, that's very interesting. It's quite similar in the way I kind of view things. As I would self-identify as an atheist, but I'm more becoming open to the idea of almost a universal consciousness of just every living thing is interconnected by being alive. The difference between a rock and the difference between a tree, to someone who doesn't look hard enough, they think, well, they're both just not moving. But it's like, no, there is a difference. You can almost feel it, you can sense it, you can see how the cycle goes, all these sorts of things. And I like to think that the whole universe, everything that is alive, is connected by this universal consciousness of balance. And that's what the overruling thing is. I don't like to believe in gods necessarily, not because I personally don't think that's feasible in our understanding of the world. I may be wrong, who knows? But I also like thinking of nothing is necessarily above anything else. I mean, granted, one human could easily kill most things on the planet, but that doesn't make us better than them. We're not better than ants, necessarily. I mean, we are from what we can tell, we have the most power on the planet, so we need to be the most conscious and be the most responsible with the planet of what we do with everyone else. But I like to think of every living thing on sort of a flat plane, and everything happened, but everything keeps itself in balance. And having one all-powerful God above it all doing everything, for how I perceive the world, doesn't seem to resonate in the same way. And I don't believe that everything else in nature equates to that. Nature doesn't always have this sort of one thing controlling everything. I know a lot of the insect kingdoms and stuff do, but if you go beyond that small level of hierarchy, it's still death and life. And that's pretty much it, isn't it? That's
Right.
the main tipping scales of life. So in a lot of ways, I think we have very similar sort of ideas and what it is, almost like atheism, but of like a glass of water is atheism, but with like maybe a drop or two of just something else, just a little bit. Like it's still like 99%, but just that little sparkle of something else. That's kind of how I look at it.
The alchemy. It's the alchemy of life.
Yeah.
I don't, they say that that within every atheist there's a prayer with no God to pray to. So I think that I live my life based on more science than anything else, and that sort of prevents me from, believing in the esoteric, if you will. But I also believe, or I can tell you that from my perspective, that there is a mystery about things. Like there's a mystery of, well, who created all of this and how did this happen? And if it was a big bang of two atoms colliding or two particles colliding, then how did those two particles get created? Like, did they just show up? Like, I think that, the mystery of how everything became, I mean, something had to start it. And that is like, when you look at the great physicists of the world, I mean, those are the biggest questions. Like, with Einstein, his quote, "I want to know the mind of God." And, maybe what he meant is he wants to know the mind of the universe, because there's so many things that we don't understand. Like, we don't even understand our microbiome. Like, our microbiome hasn't even been effectively mapped, and that's just within us. There's a microbiome that exists within all living creatures. Like, plants communicate through their microbiome. I mean, there's so many things that we don't understand, and I think that it's easy for us to get caught up in this bullshit of red states and blue states and politics and Brexit, and it's easy for us also to get hung up in our differences when that's just so petty, and we can really just celebrate our differences, and to recognize that we all basically want the same thing. We want to be happy, we want to live in peace, and we want to be safe. And I don't know, I went down the wormhole on that one.
Well, I agree with you what you're saying, and I think what a lot of it is, it stems from fear and lack of understanding. It's most of the things is when someone is, if we just said someone puts out a gun on someone, it's like, and robs somewhere, that's the fear of being unable to provide, and it's that fear that overrides compassion and the interconnectivity of everything. And it's, I mean, I try not to delve into politics too much, but a lot of my idea of it all is, there's a lot of people in this world who are very, very high up, have a lot of money, and have a lot of influence on how laws are made and help them have more money. And I'm not saying that would make, if we sorted that out a bit, I'm not saying I have all the answers. If we could curb that, and I think it is slowly, there is, the cultural shift, it is slowly, everyone's starting to realize things a little bit more. And I'm not saying I'm like heavily on the left or heavily on the right or anything like that. I think it's all about balance, you need aspects of both. But it's that I'm optimistic that over time we'll just realize, as you say, we'll kind of cut away from this petty bullshit and be like, what, this doesn't matter. We all want to be alive and healthy, so free healthcare. We want, everyone to be educated, maybe free education. Those sorts of things I think are we want the same things, but it's the perspective of how to get there. It's got a lot of the people on the right think that, oh, where's the money going to come from? But the other people on the left are too optimistic with the money, and it's all these sorts of talking at each other and saying your thing won't work because of this and your thing won't work because of that. It's like, well, we both want this thing. Can't we just kind of compromise? But people, as I said slightly earlier, it's just with people critiquing you and things like that, it's people don't know these things, and instead of wanting to learn and being able to say, you know what, maybe I'm wrong, I'm gonna accept that and try and figure out how we can be right, they want to go, no, I've got one piece of this jigsaw puzzle and you all have, and we're not going to finish this picture, we're just going to cling on to this piece, and all of us are just going to have this random misshapen thing that's useless instead of being able to all click it together to make something beautiful. That's kind of how I think about it all.
Well put. Well put. The big take home on that is fear. I think that people are afraid of what they don't understand. And I think that, coming from the perspective of somebody who lives in the United States, I think it's important for people that live here to travel abroad, because it gives them more of a global perspective. And it also enables them to see how alike we all are. And I don't know, the divisiveness that's been happening over the past 4 or 5 years, I think it's so destructive. I mean, it has to come to an end, because eventually what's going to happen, and it's happened here, is you get gridlock, because you have two people that are stuck you have two people that it's more important for them to be right than it is to be happy. And when you have those types of divisive and destructive forces, you're not going to get much done. So I think that eventually there's going to be a threshold where people just won't put up with it anymore. And I think that you're starting to see that now. I think you're starting to see, this in the past U.S. elections. You're starting to see people with, I would say, more common sense, are becoming more galvanized. And, I think that's important. And I think that, rather than all of us being separate, I do see a trend of us coming together.
I agree. And it's funny because I think I've only just realized this actually. I think another reason why Britain and America are very similar in a lot of ways is, even though I think America is like 200 times bigger than the UK and your population is 5 times ours, I think, we're on an island. So we are,
Right.
even though we are in Europe for the moment, that'll definitely put a time stamp on this for future generations if they listen to this. So that before Brexit happened, if it does happen. We're on an island, and there's a lot of sort of xenophobia. There's a lot of people who are like, immigrants are the problem, all this, that, and the other. And it's just like, you can't choose where you're born. You can
Right.
choose where you go, and you can choose what you make of yourself, but you can't choose where you're born. And now I'm not saying open borders, and I'm not saying closed borders. I don't want to necessarily get into that because I'm not educated enough to talk about those deep, complicated issues, but it's more of, don't just think, okay, we're on this island and we don't see these people or talk to anyone over there, and that means that they're bad or anything like that. And I think America, even though it's huge and you've got the 50 states and they all have their own sort of subcultures within that, it is still that sort of, we're America and this is us and we're amazing, we're the best ever. And then in England, you've got the sort of thing of where a lot of people kind of, they're not as open. Like America, the sort of stereotypical sort of patriotism in America is, we're the best, we're better than everyone. Whereas what British people are kind of like is just that we're kind of quietly better than everyone. Like, it doesn't matter what you're saying. We know that we're better than everyone else. And it's that weird. It's just like, no, we're all just people, man. It's just like, and we're both isolated from everyone else. Like it's not helpful. So it's
Right.
those sort of things I think is kind of funny to kind of recognize, of just, it's hubris. That's what everything comes down to. It's basically the two of the biggest problems in this world are hubris and fear. It's thinking that you're better than everyone and then being terrified of things and not changing. And it's just like causing this massive shitstorm of just people just screaming and running around and pointing at people. It's like, just have a moment to breathe. How about meditate a little bit, and then you can figure things out,
That was fantastic. I got nothing to add to that. That was brilliant. That was brilliant in every way. Yes.
You flatter me, sir. Okay, well, I've managed to steal your time for long enough, and you're very, very generous with your time. A very busy man. Is there anything you wanted to add or wrap up with before you kind of say adieu?
Well, I
You can plug all your stuff again. I was going to say as well after all this.
If any of your audience wants to reach out to me, they can find me. They can find me on any of the socials. Like you can find me at Guy Gone Keto on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or just Thom King, ThomKing. And I encourage your listeners to to reach out to me if they've got questions or if they're considering a lifestyle change. I'm here to contribute. I'm here to act as a coach. I'm not looking for anything in exchange for it. I just like to see people have a better quality of life. And if you want to go to the Guy Gone Keto site, if you order my book, I'll autograph it for you. And we've got some we've got some cool swag and some good products. But yeah, I encourage your audience to reach out to me, and I'll help them any way that I can.
Oh, that's wonderful, and it's great to see someone who is sort of, on. I was researching things about you, and it says obviously you're a CEO and you're an entrepreneur and you've ran companies and all these sort of things, and it's nice that I feel time goes on, especially with the internet putting spotlights on individuals such as yourself, where it's the more philanthropic of the sort of people who have, in air quotes, made it. It'd be very easy for an individual to, say, argument's sake, I'm not saying this is you necessarily, but say make a ton of money and then be up there and then just be hoarding it all and being like, I'm going to make the world better for me and me alone and screw everyone else, because that's that weird starvation mentality, which is there's only a finite amount of stuff for everyone. Not everyone can be fed and I want it all. But what you're doing is that the opposite, where you're like, I've got the resources. So what I can do is I can help others using these and make the world generally better. And that's all we can ever do. Whether you're someone who's working class and doesn't have much money, if you contribute a tiny amount to, a small amount of charity, or you're just nice to people in general, spreading positive ideologies and positive mindsets, that can have a big ripple effect. And the more spotlight an individual has and the more resources they have behind them, is very refreshing to see doing that and causing even bigger ripples. And so I just want to say thank you for doing all those things, and it's been a great chatting with you, man.
Yeah, me too. I think that that was really, yeah, that was a huge compliment. I think that really about 10 years ago, because you did bring up scarcity, that people come from a space of scarcity, and I think that about 10 years ago, everything took a shift for me, and I'm not sure exactly what caused it, maybe just age, but I really, got to the point where it's like, okay, so I can continue to make money, I can continue to build companies and invest, or I can just put those kind of on autopilot, and guide them, but really dig deeper into what type of a legacy I want to leave behind. And that legacy is just, like you said, being nice to somebody, being nice to other people, or coming from a space of contribution. I mean, I think that if all of us could do that, if all of us could just, operate from a place of loving kindness, and what we can do for others instead of, constantly looking out for ourselves. I really think that on a global basis, if we just make that mindset shift, that we could really change the world.
And that's a brilliant way to end it, man. And I'll be sure to include all the links and everything in the description and whatnot. And I'm certain that even if it stopped now, which I really hope it doesn't, your legacy is already very rich and very beneficial. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Mike. I really appreciate you having me on. This is hands down the best podcast, best interview I had.
Thank you very much. And you've been an absolutely stellar guest as well. So we'll cut it off there. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
And that's the end of the podcast. Thanks as always for tuning in, guys. I think next week I will be releasing another episode of Science But Simple. I think I haven't fully figured that out yet. This weekend I am going up to London to do a podcast with another returning guest. So look out for that. I'm also going to see Book of Mormon. That I'm very excited for. But by the time this episode airs, I'll have already seen Book of Mormon. So time loop. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm rambling because my brain is just frazzled. It's quite late on a Thursday night, and I'm just doing this now, so I don't do it on a Sunday night, so I can just chill after being in London all the time. So my fabulous, loyal podcast listeners are dealing with my rambling, rubbish outro because I am forward-thinking and just want to chill out on my Sunday without having to do too much work. So sorry about that, guys. Coming weeks, once again, it's one of those things where in the coming weeks I am recording quite a few episodes over Skype, and I don't like to necessarily name the people I'm doing it with just in case plans change or anything like that. So just have to keep your eyes peeled, I guess. I appreciate each and every one of you listening, as always. Any reviews on any of the sort of usual platforms like iTunes are always appreciated. What's appreciated the most, though, is sharing with your friends. The thing with the show is, this show isn't going to be for everyone. Everyone's not going to love every episode. But I'm sure most people could find at least one episode they like. So, if you're a long-term listener, it would really help me out, and hopefully it'll help other people out to share some of the episodes that I've done, and any of the interesting people I've had, I'm sure will love the exposure too. So appreciate any shares that we get. Anyway, guys, I'm going to stop rambling now, or I'm just going to be here forever and try to subtly extend the length of the episode so it seems not too short. I'm joking, but people who listen this far, I assume, actually care a little bit more who I am and what I think about, because there's not that many people who listen to right at the very end of the podcast and listen to the past minute or so of rambling and keep listening. So I'm gonna go. Thanks as always for tuning in, guys. I love each and every one of you, and I'll talk to you all next week.